Remembering a Kansas City icon, a new leader in the race for Kansas City mayor, but how much weight do you give to polls? Amid a worsening measles outbreak, why Missouri moves to protect those who don't vaccinate their children. Plus, is it the end of the line for Schlitterbahn and the end for one of Kansas City's most talked about athletes?
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. It has been an extraordinarily fast-moving week of news, and we're going to do our best this half hour to make sense of it all with you, connecting the dots on the week's top local headlines from KMBC 9 News senior political reporter Michael Mahoney, and from 41 Action News reporter Stephen Dial, from Fox 4 News reporter Shannon O'Brien, and from the pages of your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. Now, there is plenty of salaciousness and crime in the news, but we want to start with recognizing a remarkable life on a more uplifting note. A public memorial service set for Monday at the Nelson Atkins Museum for one of the best-known names in Kansas City. The man who put the H in H&R Block died this week while in hospice care. He was 96 years old. Henry Block was known for the national tax preparation firm he helped build, but today is perhaps better remembered for what he did after he left the company. The millions he donated to UMKC and its Block School of Business, and the personal art fortune he left to the Nelson Atkins Museum, which expanded through his support and keeps his name alive in its contemporary edition, the Block Gallery. This week we're also hearing about lots of other transformational gifts and contributions Block made, including the more than $50 million he and his family foundation gave to St. Luke's Hospital. Shannon?
Absolutely. He was an extraordinary man, an extraordinary Kansas Cityan, and he was actually a friend of my grandfather's. So I knew him personally a little bit when I was younger, and just the nicest guy. And really, there's not many other men left like him.
There's the fountain in front of Union Station, so many different areas. However, I also thought it was interesting that Emmanuel Cleaver, the Kansas City congressman, said this week that he wouldn't have been elected mayor if it wasn't for Henry Block. Really?
I don't know about that. I do know that I have friend after friend after friend in Kansas City that have taken advantage of the Block School of Business at UMKC, and among his many philanthropic efforts, that is one that is going to have a lasting legacy, I believe, to it. And the fact is Kansas City needs to be looking for the next generation of these folks.
We've seen a lot of these entrepreneurial leaders have died now, Dave Helling. But will their legacy continue, though? Because they all started foundations. Ewing Kauffman has the Kauffman Foundation. So even though we haven't found that new generation of leaders, isn't that money still going to be supporting all of these efforts, or is Kansas City in trouble?
Yes, and of course they wanted it to be that way. They wanted to extend their influence beyond the end of their natural lives. What I'm struck by, Nick, is Henry Block was a bit of an outsider in Kansas City. He famously was denied entrance to the Kansas City Country Club because he's Jewish. That was a huge story for a time. He was eventually admitted. Ewing Kauffman was a bit of an outsider, too. Entrepreneurs tend to be a little bit outside of the mainstream of sort of the old money in Kansas City, and to some degree may have been looked down upon a little bit, and yet at the end, they turn out to be more influential almost than anyone, with the exception maybe of the Hall family in Kansas City. Kauffman, Block, and Hall are really the Mount Rushmore of philanthropy in this community, and Henry Block will be greatly missed.
Are there others who could be on that Mount Rushmore of leaders in Kansas City?
Not that we've seen step forward immediately now.
Neil Patterson was of that new generation, now became the largest company in Cerner, also now deceased in the last 12 months.
Now, so the idea of who steps forward is, as Dave is mentioning here, is a good question. Patterson would have been one. He died way too young. But Kansas City needs these people and needs this spirit to continue.
Now, the public memorial. Sorry,
Shannon. I'm just going to say the kids of these folks could step up. You have a Mariner Kemper. You've got the younger Blocks. So it's going to depend upon whether they pick up the ball and keep it rolling for their fathers. Really.
The public memorial for Block, by the way, taking place Monday at 1:30 p.m. at the Nelson Museum. KCPT will pay tribute to Block with special programming Sunday at 5:30. As most of us are not in the legal profession, it's hard for us to sometimes understand legal decisions. It wasn't long ago that the whole country was outraged when charges were abruptly dropped against actor Jussie Smollett, which brings us to Kansas City and a decision by the Johnson County District Attorney not to file charges against Chiefs football star Tyreek Hill after his 3-year-old son was removed from the home amid allegations of abuse. DA Steve Howe says he thinks a crime did occur, but can't prove beyond reasonable doubt who committed it.
Like a lot of crimes, it's a whodunit. And in many times with child cases, the children can't necessarily speak for themselves. So that becomes a very difficult situation.
Now, since then, an audio recording has surfaced. It allegedly features Hill and his fiancée, in which he is heard threatening her as she claims he was the one who did it. The audio was sent to KCTV5 and reportedly recorded as the couple walked through Dubai International Airport. Hill has now been pulled from team activities as the Chiefs investigate. But how do we know the tape is true? And if it is, why wasn't it given to authorities before?
Well, that's the big question. Why was this tape kept? And allegedly, Crystal gave it to a couple of friends as an insurance policy, depending upon what happened moving forward. And I think this tape could get her in trouble because she is heard on the tape saying that she lied to investigators, she had his back, and that's going to be something that Steve Howe is going to have to look at, and that could open this case wide up again.
I think Shannon's exactly right on this. This tape, if it is accurate, if it is genuine, could be the toehold that prosecutors need to open this case for the very reasons that you said, Shannon, there. And so, if it's genuine, this is a big deal. It's a big deal for the Johnson County Prosecutor's Office and for pro football.
You know, I have to say that this is a show that we tape on a Friday morning at 10 a.m. Lots of things can change. We have no control over what the Chiefs or the NFL may do this weekend in this case. But a lot of people are focusing on lifting up the hood on the justice system. And some people were outraged this week, Stephen, that how is it somebody like Tyreek Hill was escaped any charges in this case? But the prosecutor saying this happens all the time in these cases. It's hard to prove.
Right. And it's important to remember that Steve Howe was just saying we don't know who did it. Charges aren't dropped. This investigation is ongoing, and you mentioned, especially from the Chiefs and the NFL standpoint, this is being taped on Friday. The Chiefs have a press conference Friday afternoon. A lot of people are also going to be looking at the Chiefs because think about the Chiefs' leadership and the recent players that they have added and defending them when it comes to some prior allegations or prior legal troubles and saying, just trust us, we've made a right decision for the community. And so this story is far from ending.
Yeah. I would only add this. Steve Howe said something so very important in that news conference that applies far beyond the Tyreek Hill case. He said in this country, and he's right, in this country, we would prefer that guilty people go free before we put innocent people in jail. And that's an extraordinarily high standard. And when prosecutors make decisions to pursue cases or not pursue them, the public can be misled a little bit. Well, everybody knows this, everybody knows that. In fact, you have to prove it.
Right.
And what he said repeatedly is, I can't prove what I need to prove to punish someone.
But there was certainly speculation this week, and I saw a lot on social media, Shannon. This was celebrity justice. If this was a plumber from Raytown, would the result have been the same?
I think so. I absolutely think so. Because, I mean, Steve Howe is not a guy known for doing this for celebrities or people who are sports figures or anything in Kansas City. I really think that I spoke to a former deputy director of the DCF yesterday, and she said this is very, very common because when you get in these type of domestic issues, people lie for each other and they cover everything up. They don't want their kids taken away. So it's very common that these are very hard cases to prosecute.
And while we only heard a snippet of that 11-minute alleged recording, I mean, from what we heard, it's still hard to decide or come up with an opinion on who did what. And so
because he doesn't on the tape ever say, I did this.
Correct. They're just talking about disciplining their child, which is up to everyone's interpretation of it.
But there is still a sense here that if you're famous or you're wealthy, you get more breaks here. And I suspect that when the police were called to Joe Plummer's house in Johnson County, somebody in that house would have went to jail that night.
Right.
I don't believe that happened in this case, and there is this perception that money gets you a break, and so does fame.
Can I just say very quickly that I think the criminal case will play itself out, and we'll see whether the tape plays a role in that or whether Steve Howe changes his mind. The real onus is on the NFL and the Chiefs,
Right.
who are not held to the evidentiary standard that maybe the courts are, rightly so. The Chiefs have an important decision to make, and the NFL have an important, and particularly as Steve notes, because of their history in this regard, they have to walk away from Tyreek Hill in some very visible way.
Do they walk away from their recent hire, who also had issues with assault on a woman?
Believe me, he will be asked that question over and over.
We tape this program again on a Friday morning at 10. Things do change in the news. In fact, as we're just starting the show, we learn that the Kansas Supreme Court rules that the state constitution protects abortion. That is breaking news as we tape the show Friday morning. What are the implications of that, Stephen Dial?
Well, we've been talking about this as well. I mean, I think I don't want to jump the gun, but it kind of sets a precedent for how abortions and laws will go in Kansas. The Supreme Court basically sending it back down to the lower court, saying that Senate Bill 95 violates the healthy procedures that the doctors, the plaintiffs were saying. And so I know Dr. Helling right here will be able to expound more. But it really, I mean, we've seen real-time reaction from the Republican leadership saying that this is a judicial overreach, saying, Susan Wagle saying that where in the state constitution does it protect this violent act from happening. And so this is far from over, but it's a big step.
One commentary on this, Dave Helling, is even if Roe v. Wade were reversed, abortion will remain legal in Kansas as a result of this decision?
We've been waiting 2 years for this decision. It is a landmark decision for the Kansas Supreme Court, and in essence it says that the Kansas Constitution protects a right to abortion, a fundamental right. Now, it also says it's not absolute. That suggests there are some ways to limit abortion in the state that would meet constitutional muster. The question is where that line is drawn. That will touch off enormous battles in the legislature, future court cases. But what it does mean, as Steve suggests, is even if the federal government outlaws Roe v. Wade or overturns Roe v. Wade, the Kansas Constitution still protects a fundamental right to an abortion.
And isn't this going to galvanize support for conservatives, though, in Kansas?
Absolutely. The lawmakers are about to come back to Topeka, and in the moments after this ruling was handed down on Friday morning, the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House came out blistering the opinion. So did Kansas Senator Jerry Moran. So when the lawmakers return to Topeka here for this veto session, I would expect that it will put some fire and fuel into the effort of doing another bill to deal with this issue by the conservative Republicans in Kansas. So, as we've been saying all here, this is not over, and we've probably pivoted in the abortion.
There will be an attempt.
The abortion debate.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's going to be an effort here. No
There
question.
will be an attempt next week to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot in 2020 that would outlaw abortion in Kansas, or at least take away the protection extended by the court today.
Just one other thing here, just to clarify this for our viewers. This is, as Steve mentioned, from a 2015 bill. This is not the fetal heartbeat discussion that is underway in many states, including Missouri right now. This is from a 2015 bill dealing with the second trimester abortion. This is not fetal heartbeat. Just saying that.
So much else to cover on this Week in Review. Big doubts remain this week over whether one of Kansas City's most publicized attractions will ever reopen. The Schlitterbahn Water Park should be getting ready to welcome its first visitors of the new season next month. But they've not been hiring any summer season staff, and there's still no information on their website about how to purchase tickets. What is the word from the company, Shannon O'Brien?
There is no word from the company, and that is frustrating to everybody. It's frustrating to us, it's frustrating to the people who want to go there, and it's really frustrating to Wyandotte County. They haven't even told Wyandotte County what their plans are. But I'll tell you, something's going to happen with Schlitterbahn. If you want to know an absolute, it will not open this year, is what I'm hearing.
Well, we saw some video from your report on Fox 4 News that actually law enforcement is using that now for training facilities.
They are. We understand that the Kansas City, Kansas SWAT team is using it to learn how to break into buildings and do their training, plus the motorcycle police are using it. Topeka was just there the other day doing their training. So it doesn't look good. Something's going to happen with that land, though. Wyandotte County does not want a dead water park right in that spot. That's very...
So what are the options? You could actually redevelop it. There's so much development already occurring there. Plus, another attraction could take it over, another water park.
And that's what the mayor of KCK and the Unified Government, Dave Alvey, says. Look, fundamentally, despite the disasters and the terrible accident that happened there, it's a good water park. It's in a good site, and he thinks, I think you're right, Shannon, it's not going to be Schlitterbahn, but he thinks another park, a water park company is going to come in, buy that, and it will be a water park again in Kansas City, Kansas, but it's not probably going to be open this year at all. He's very optimistic about that, and he also says that the STAR bonds that helped to finance that park, about $82 million, also dealt with other businesses out there. Yes, they're going to take a hit, says the mayor, but fundamentally those bonds are not in jeopardy.
Now, another major local attraction making headlines this week, but was it really 300 rampaging teens at Worlds of Fun? 300 teenagers brawling, screamed one headline this week. Law enforcement called in from multiple law enforcement agencies to restore calm at Kansas City's largest amusement park. Was it really as bad as the headlines made out, Stephen Dial?
I've been confused on this, and I was working that day because if there were 300 people brawling, fighting, some type of altercation in the world that we live in with cell phones, it's just shocking that no one was injured, one person was cited, not arrested. If there was this huge brawl and law enforcement had, helped me calls and 5 other or more than 5 departments responded, I'm just still trying to understand what exactly happened. Yes, you see students, young people running around. We talked to one 14-year-old who was there, parents in a long line, street backed up to pick up their kids. I'm still unclear as to what exactly happened, and we haven't really gotten much of an explanation as to what specifically started this.
Was this really any different than the kinds of teen activities that we've seen and disarray that sometimes takes place, from the Kansas City Zoo to the Country Club Plaza, Shannon O'Brien?
Not really. I mean, I think that these attractions are going to have to figure out how to stop this from happening and how to stop these incidents from happening before they start, or else people aren't going to want to go there. I mean, I know people don't go to Westport so much anymore that are, want to stay away from that. The plaza has suffered a little bit, and now Worlds of Fun. So whatever happens, they're going to have to get control of this before it starts, I think. And as far as 300 kids, I wasn't there, but I agree with Stephen. That kind of seems like...
And 19 teenagers have now been banned from the park. Is that the end of this? Is that any other rule changes that take place?
We'll see as the summer unfolds, Nick, but I think my colleagues are right in this sense. Almost certainly what happened at the park is that a core of people probably got into a bit of a shoving match for whatever reason, and then people gathered around, and that's where you get the 300, and it's late at night. But it is similar to all of the other sort of young disturbances that we see in other places. Swope Park used to be a focus for some of this. Stars on Broadway, remember, Mike, when you and I would go down there and cover, and the kids would be gathered in the cars and the music and the noise. Kansas City has struggled for as long as I've been a reporter here and trying to figure out how to keep these crowds, under some control during summer nights, and now Worlds of Fun is facing that challenge.
Now, Worlds of Fun is in the heart of Clay County, and it was mainly Clay County Sheriff's Department officers who responded to that disturbance over the weekend. They've got plenty of other problems, though, to deal with. In fact, the Clay County Sheriff is suing the county for retaliating against him. Did you see that story? Sheriff Paul Vescova says he's had half his budget cut after he launched an investigation of county staff.
Do I feel it's retaliatory? I can't help but feel that way, that it is. I filed this lawsuit, quite honestly, out of desperation, so that this office can continue to function.
The sheriff says law enforcement in Clay County is now in jeopardy, and he's running out of money to run the county jail. This, of course, is not the first big headline coming out of Clay County over the last several months. We know citizens launched a petition for an audit of state government to lift up the hood on what on earth was happening in the county there, rather. How does this fit into that, Michael?
This ratifies the opinion of many Clay Countyans that the gang in the courthouse in Liberty is the gang that can't shoot straight. And this is piled on top of the audit, piled on top of other things like sending out promotional material that looks like it's political but may not be, that there's a great deal of angst and dysfunction inside of that courthouse. The county commission does not get along. They've got the state audit that they're fighting tooth and nail. Now they've got the sheriff saying that his budget is a target for retaliation because he doesn't like what's going on. There's a lot of problems in Clay County. Not a happy place by any stretch of the imagination.
So what is the response, though, of Clay County commissioners? They must say absolutely not.
Well,
There's no
they're
issues.
trying to stop the audit, and they presumably, Nick, will claim some control over the sheriff's budget. That's true in most county commissions and legislatures. I do think that Clay County, like a lot of counties in Missouri, has this 3-person commission, which Jackson County used to have years and years and years ago.
We used to call them judges, even though they weren't judges.
And you'd have one in western Jackson County, one in eastern Jackson County, and a presiding judge. Harry Truman was the presiding judge once. And 3-person boards can tend to break down because you get a lot of 2-to-1 votes, and that raises personal hackles. I think that's happening to a large degree up in Clay County as well. So there needs to be some sort of reform, maybe, that goes beyond just what the sheriff wants or what maybe this audit will find.
How much weight do you give opinion polls this week? A new political poll puts Quinton Lucas way ahead of Jolie Justice in the race for Kansas City mayor. He's up 7 points over Justice in the Missouri Scout poll, which is all the more remarkable because no poll has ever shown her in any position other than the leading frontrunner, Stephen Dial. In fact, how much should we put into this when even in the primary, Quinton Lucas only had no more than 4% support?
I've been skeptical of polls since a couple of years ago. And, a lot of us journalists, we use polls because that's one of the key ways that we can use to try to get a meter on what the people are thinking. But as I walked around the community, especially post-primary, now when we have 2 final candidates, a lot of people from different communities, Brookside, South Kansas City, downtown, Plaza, have said, I haven't been questioning this poll, so how is this truly an interpretation of what everyone is thinking? You said the exact point. In the primary, Quinton Lucas wasn't polling that high, and some other candidates weren't polling that high. And then when we looked at the final results, it was totally different. So, on polls.
We showed you the video from your report, Michael. So how much should we put into this?
This was put together. This poll for the Missouri Scout was done by Remington Research, which is an arm of Axiom Strategies, which is a consulting firm here. They talked to 619 people, 18 people, that said they were likely voters in the general election. And to do that, they probably went through several thousand people on their screening to get there. Now, I think a lot of people's eyes got raised by a 7-point lead for Quinton Lucas in there. The fellow that conducted that poll, Titus Bonds, got a good reputation in this field. He thinks that Jolie Justice, by virtue of this poll, has got a lot of work to do and may be in serious trouble from the standpoint that Justice had 31% of this poll, 7 points behind Quinton Lucas, and then there was also 31% that was undecided. His point is that Justice will have to work really hard to make up that 7-point deficit among those 31% that are undecided. She'll have to get well over half of them to do so. So he thinks that she's got a lot of work to do. And to use his words, Bond says she might have to run a perfect campaign to win the race.
Why? This is interesting because, Dave, after the election, you said that he had the uphill struggle in this.
Right, and I talked to some Justice campaign people yesterday who said, nah, this poll isn't accurate. They think it's a 1-point race. Yeah, they think it's a 1-point race. But they do agree that there is about a third of the electorate that has yet to make up its mind. And a lot of people have said, well, how can that be? You're only 8 weeks away or whatever. And the reality is, since we don't elect by party in Kansas City, people have to make individual choices. They have to study the candidates. It's not, well, I'll vote for the Republican or the Democrat. Yeah. So there is an opportunity for both candidates. It remains wide open. I still think Justice is the favorite, frankly, Nick, because she'll have much more money than Quinton Lucas will in the closing days and much more sort of the institutional support, but it'll be very close, and there is a path. I wrote that in a column this week. There is a path for Quinton Lucas, and this poll suggests.
And very quickly, the battleground on this is going to be north of the river. Well, it is a swing county, Clay County in particular, a swing county in Missouri state elections. It will be the battleground in this mayor's race.
Now, as the country deals with the worst measles outbreak in 25 years, the state of Missouri is moving to protect parents who choose not to vaccinate their children. A Missouri House committee has debated a proposal that would keep public schools, universities, daycare centers, and doctors from turning away a child from being vaccinated. Missouri House member Lynn Morris, a Republican from Ozark, just south of Springfield, says he isn't against vaccines. He's just for people's right to choose. He says parents are getting bullied, intimidated, discriminated against. What evidence is there of that happening in Missouri?
Well, I think that there are I have heard from some parents that they are scared about their children going to school with kids that aren't vaccinated for the measles and other vaccines because, it is spreading. And when this whole trend started, these diseases started popping up again. But the problem is going to be what's more important, an individual's right to choose and public health. Because if this really does explode, then you're going to have to weigh both of those. And I think maybe public health might win.
So what is the progress of this bill? Is this going to become law, or is this just one of these issues that comes up to get people up in arms, Michael?
I think it's going to be a long shot down in Jefferson City. They had a hearing on this week and a half ago, and it was packed to the gills in there with the anti-vaxxer crowd that were supporting Representative Morris's bill. But we are in late April. The session is going to end on May 15th. It is still in committee or just out of committee. You would have to go through the House, through the Senate, and probably go back to a conference committee. That's not a lot of time to do something as complex as this. So I don't think it's going to get through.
And finally this week, almost every big political name in the region was in Kansas City, Kansas. They were attending an outdoor ceremony to celebrate the designation of the Quindaro ruins as a national commemorative site. What is the significance of Quindaro, and why was everybody there?
It is probably the largest set of ruins from an old underground railroad station from which runaway slaves in Missouri got to Parkville, crossed the Missouri River, and got into free Kansas. It's probably the largest set of ruins that exist in the nation for a town like that, which was actually founded by the Wyandotte Indians. What it means is that it's the first step toward either making this a National Historic Landmark or even maybe a national monument. The significance of that is that opens up a federal purse.
So it's all about the money.
Yeah.
It's all about the money.
Absolutely. That is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from 41 Action News, Stephen Dial, and Dave Helling of your Kansas City Star. From Fox 4 News, Shannon O'Brien, and Michael Mahoney from KMBC 9 News. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.